Hello, friends, and welcome to the Weekend Catch-Up Club, the coffee morning show brought to you live every Saturday direct to Facebook and available later on demand at youtube.com/gamertag. Today, for episode 26, I am joined by a very special guest. It is game designer and BAFTA member Jonathon Wilson. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me, man. It's sounds probably going to be an interesting morning. So
we were just trying to work out. I was like, why is technology not working? Why is it throwing us off? It's like Skype is just doing its thing. We're like boosting gain like crazy. So we're gonna try and monitor it.
Yeah, that's just work life in 2020 and now in 2021, right? It's like all this remote working, all these Skype calls and Zoom calls and everything you do. So but we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
100%. So speaking of life in 2020, how's the pandemic been for you? Like all of last year and obviously into 2021 as well. How's it been working from home and as a game developer as well? You don't have that in-office camaraderie necessarily. Like how has the whole setup been for you?
So it was definitely an interesting shift, and like it's been a year of learning everything, right? Because like you said, you're not in the office, you don't have that camaraderie anymore. You can't just flip around, turn around to someone's desk, solve a problem together. But for us, it kicked off like at the very beginning. I think it was the week before, like the entire world went into lockdown. We started transitioning to work from home, kind of like out of the office. And at that point, we were in the thick of development on Mafia, obviously heading towards kind of like finalizing the game, because obviously it did come out last year as well. So it's kind of some of the points where you want to be in the office, you want to kind of be standing in the trenches, right? So we were thinking about how do we recapture that same thing, but remotely. So setting up with Zoom and Slack and almost just having that open like comms for communication and stuff was really good as well. And it did become a point of sometimes you'll just chat while you have a coffee, a little bit like this, right? Like, so me and a friend would have a call in the morning, maybe for like 15 minutes, like outside of stand-up or whatever. And it's just so you had that, you could talk about your day, you could discuss problems or whatever, or talk about what you've been playing, because there wasn't much else we could actually do. And then from a development point of view, it did feel like you were working in isolation a lot of the time, outside of meetings and outside of stand-up. But that's why it became more important to reach out for help if you needed it, ask questions when you needed it, and just making sure you were always staying in contact with the studio. And it was trying to find the like benefits of it, right? So it meant I could on a lunch easily go for a run or whatever, because I'm at home. I'm going to come home, I can get ready and stuff and get changed really easily. I can go for like kind of like go out for walks or whatever and kind of enjoy being in Brighton, right? Because it was really nice in the summer last year. So like being in the house all the time wasn't great. But also it was just nice to get away from the PC, purely because it allowed me to solve a lot of my problems. Like you just go tunnel vision on something because you're trapped in the house, you're in a box all day, but get up, go for a walk, and you come back with like a fresh perspective and stuff.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I couldn't agree more with that, because I love to just like take the dog for a walk, go for a run, and it really does kind of get you away from the desk for an hour, get to kind of stretch, get some fresh air, and like you said, fresh perspective as well. So for the benefit of our viewers who don't know exactly who Mr. Jonathon Wilson is, you mentioned Mafia there. So of course you were a level designer at Hangar 13 Games. Can you talk a little bit about your time there and also your background as well before maybe even getting to Hangar 13 Games, like your experience in the industry, getting started, and then obviously up to where you are now?
Okay, so it ends at Hangar, like that's where, like that's my most recent, like kind of I guess achievement, my most recent release. But going back to the beginning, which feels like a very long time ago now, I kind of came through, I guess, what you class as a more conventional educational route, like up until a certain point. So I went to college in Newcastle, like coming out of school, nobody knows what you need to do to actually get into game dev. Like no teacher can tell you that at secondary school. But I discovered it was around the time games in education was becoming a bit of a thing. And I discovered this course at Newcastle College, which was like it was like a BTEC, and it was like media production for game development. So I was like, right, okay, this possibly going to help me, or at least give me the information I need to make an informed decision later on. So that was the kind of the start of it. I got into that. It taught me different perspectives about the industry. It taught me, like, weirdly at college, I was learning about more like the legal side of it and stuff like that as well. So like policies, trademarking, copywriting, a lot of which I didn't do at university, but at least I touched base on it then. And I've not really used it since, touch wood, because I'm not publishing or anything like that. And then from there, like, I knew it's like when I finished that year course, I was like, I got my, I think it was like DDD, which was like triple distinction, which gave me enough UCAS points basically to have my pick of universities at the time. And I knew I still wanted to do game development, but I kind of didn't necessarily know where to go. I wanted to also kind of stay local to the Northeast. Like that's where I was born. It's where I was raised. It's where I studied. It's where I spent the majority of the beginning of my career as well. And I interviewed at both Teesside Uni and Northumbria Uni. I ended up going with Northumbria because I felt from the interview point of view, at Teesside, it felt a lot more art heavy, at least the course they were selling to me at the time. And I can't really draw. So that was a little bit of a turn off at the time. But Northumbria's at the time, at least from this perspective, seemed to have a bit more of a broad range. And it at least kept me focused on wanting to find my way into games. I don't necessarily think the course was the best course in the world, but I think if you speak to anyone that's done a games course, they're going to have their gripes with it and stuff like that. But then the biggest part for me was coming into the second year and third year of my degree, and it was starting to understand the value of networking. So a little bit like you build your network by reaching out to guests and getting them on your show. Yeah. But in Newcastle or in the Northeast, there was at least a solid base of game developers within the region. So there was a chance for you to possibly meet those developers, kind of get in front of them, have a conversation, and a little bit get some career advice. So it was kind of taking advantage of that side of it and actually meeting people, which actually led me to curing, again, I guess, best bit of professional game development experience, and that was doing like a kind of internship with a small indie studio in Newcastle called Nosebleed Interactive, where I got to do some QA work on a Vita game called The Hungry Horse. And I got to do a little bit of design stuff, but it was mainly QAing it. And I did that alongside the final year of my degree, which the biggest benefit of that was it showed me what building a game like within Unity actually look like, and seeing how you go through certification, passing that process. And it's like, it's not just building the game. Yeah. It's a lot more that happens.
A whole other side to the business. Yeah.
Obviously building the game is the fun part. But yeah, there's a lot of like legalities and stuff like that go with it. And I found it all fascinating, and I can guarantee you, like, I learned a lot more doing that than probably is what I got from like my degree overall. But that's always going to be the case, right? Your first week in any job that you've studied for or trained for, your first week you'll learn more than what you probably learned in the degree. That's always going to happen. And then going forward from that, like I graduated, and because I had that experience, and obviously I'd met a lot of like developers within the region and stuff like that, I got my first like full-time design job with Coatsink, which was a very small developer based in Sunderland at the time. Yeah. And when I joined, I'd already known what games they were working on. They just did a VR puzzle game called Esper, and they had been showcasing a game called Shoe, which was like a 2.5D platformer, kind of reminiscent of Rayman and stuff. And I loved Rayman, and like I always liked the look of the game. So I actually got on it, which was actually super cool. So from there, I kind of like started out like, I guess what you class as a junior. Obviously, in a smaller company, you don't necessarily have tiers or titles or stuff at the time. And working on that I learned a lot. It went into active development. I learned about 2D level design versus kind of 3D level design and stuff like that, which is a bit of a kind of polar shift, but there's a lot of transferable knowledge between the two. Or at least I found there's tricks of the trade you can kind of use on both. Yeah. And the cool thing about that project is I got to wear many hats because it was a small studio. Eventually, like, we rejigged a lot of the game. It got delayed a bunch, as games tend to do. But like at the end of the day, you delay a game to make it better, or at least that's what like most developers want to do, right? More time allows us more polish or to refactor stuff. So I got to do a little bit of a lead role in that as well. So I got to do some like kind of collaborating with other designers quite intimately. And then that was kind of super fun, but that kind of just kickstarted my like career and interest in kind of trying to mentor people and stuff like that as well within my job roles. And I continued that for like 3.5 years with Coatsink and went through a bunch of VR titles, which building VR games is super fun. It can be super limiting and frustrating sometimes to try and overcome and solve all these problems because you don't have conventional means of like first-person camera controllers and stuff like that. You can't do as much because you can't take control away from the player because they are in it, like they are in the experience. But it's definitely a cool platform to develop for. I think when more people get to see it and experience it, once you've had it, you kind of get it, right? You're wowed and you see it. And it's like, I don't know if you've experienced much VR stuff yourself, but like you can always usually remember your first VR experience, and it's usually that's the tipping point. If that's bad, you're just going to write off VR forever.
I got to when PlayStation VR first came out. I think the first game I played in it was by Guerrilla Liverpool, and it was that mech kind of combat shooter, like arena thing. Yeah, and I loved it. I was fully invested in VR at that point. I still don't have a PSVR, unfortunately, but it's so exciting as a medium because we're seeing more and more games that are like Star Wars Rogue Squadrons, for example, is like a fully VR game. Half-Life Alyx, like we're really getting to see what can be done in VR. So being able to develop for VR, I can imagine is just an incredibly exciting like new tool to creatively explore and have some fun with.
Well, it was completely new, right? There was no rule book on how to build VR games, right? Or how to do movement systems or how to do like interactions and stuff like that. So like everyone, it did generate a very like tight-knit community of like VR developers because we were all faced with the same problems, and then it was kind of more of like how do you overcome them, which was quite nice, and it did like form a lot of good relationships and friendships and stuff with throughout the industry just by doing that stuff because we were always talking about the same stuff or trying to come up with the same thing. In terms of like the industry, fast forward, now you have the Quest, which that's the last headset I got to develop. It was like the reason I like it so much is there's no wires. You could literally put it on and it kind of just works. It kind of puts you in VR, gives you that VR experience, which is kind of super fun. It's actually really nice to see. And obviously they did the Quest 2 and stuff since then. But I do feel that could be the point where you start to see it become a bit more mainstream. I still think it's got a long way to go before you start seeing it being the system seller that you see from like a Uncharted or like a Halo game. But it could get there. But I don't think that's necessarily what the manufacturers of VR want anymore. They want it to be an entertainment platform, not just a gaming platform, which is why you see it get used for a lot more stuff. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we were to get a Halo VR title, man, that I think would get me fully invested. I know Microsoft have no plans or no announcements that they're entertaining really VR, but if they were to strike a deal with Oculus or something to make like the Series X compatible with that, I would probably jump into and get like a Quest 2 or something, because that's, it's like an all-contained VR solution, but you can also do the PC link, so you've still got the horsepower of your PC. If they did something like that where you can be the Master Chief, like you're in the helmet, you've got the visor and everything like that, and that could be a really cool, like, fun experience. But who knows where VR is going to take us, but there's a lot of exciting titles that are coming and a lot of experiments that are coming as well.
Well, I think it's one thing, the fact it's still here, right? It hasn't gone away and just like came out. It was here for like a year to 2 years and then disappeared. Yeah. It's still got a mind share. It's still got content coming out for it. If that makes sense, it's kind of like we have had it before and it went away and kind of died because it was more of a gimmick. But now we are seeing it a lot more to kind of come through.
Yeah.
So after a bunch of VR stuff, so I left Coatsink and I joined my friend's studio as kind of to be like a lead designer and producer there. And it was kind of just like, we'd always wanted to kind of try working together. And he had a bunch of little games, little independent developer, and he had like loads of prototypes. So there was lots of different ideas kind of flying around. But at the time, he'd also getting a chance to work or collaborate with Superhot to bring Superhot to Quest or work on the port of that. So a large part of my time there was working on that. And then also helping them kind of build out 4 games, which we got like kind of demos ready and took them to Rezzed in 2019, which kind of was a super fun experience because it was the first time I'd had to be involved with a little bit of the management side of getting that set up, kind of agreeing on what we do for the booth and stuff like that, which was kind of super fun. So that was a fun experience, and it was very different to go from not just making the games anymore, kind of having to focus on all the other stuff as well. And then after that was my biggest step of where I decided to leave the Northeast kind of completely and move down to Brighton, which is when we kind of got to the point of working on Mafia to join Hangar 13. And that was more me wanting to pursue level design as like my full-time job. Or at least the position of I was just doing. And obviously, I liked it. I was kind of obsessed with it. I was learning a lot about it, reading about it, talking about it quite a lot. But I didn't have that as my main responsibility when I was developing or building games. It was kind of being that jack of all trades or wearing multiple hats. So to do that on Mafia for like a year, over a year and a half on like Mafia, and then continuing that with Hangar 13, obviously up until most recently, was super fun. It was really interesting. It was a different experience to see different development pipelines, because going from like indie to mid-sized companies to a AAA studio means the development pipeline's a lot different. Team size is a big one that changes. Obviously, I think before like Hangar, working with teams of maybe like 70 to 80 max. Bear in mind, when I started my career, I was working with teams of like 8 to 10.
I was going to say it would be quite a jump in terms of not just like the production that's involved in a Mafia game, but like it's amazing that you say, because you started at Coatsink, which is like an indie, like quite a small indie, but successful, sure. So you're getting to exposed to lots of different aspects of the business, and you're really getting more exposure than maybe you would have gotten had like somebody coming out of university, out of high school, whatever, and going to like a big AAA as a junior might not have gotten the exposure to do like all of these different parts of the production pipeline. But that you're so well grounded from all those years at Coatsink that when you go to AAA, you've got such a wealth of knowledge and such a wealth of exposure and experience that yes, you can focus on level design, but you've also got such a great knowledge base of all these other parts as well. So it adds to not just your value, but what you can bring to that team. And I think that's just a really interesting like way to start your career in the industry.
I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Joining an indie studio where you get to wear multiple hats, for instance, like you say, it's less likely to happen when you go to a AAA studio, does give you a better grounding. And I guess for students coming out of university or college or whatever, pursuing a job in games, a lot of them have this ideal of they have a favorite studio they want to work for, and it's usually going to be a big AAA one, right? So they'll ideally be tailoring their CVs to target that studio, or tailoring their portfolios to target that studio. However, you have to appreciate you will be limited in your capacity a little bit, but you can become a master of that craft. Mm-hmm. So if you go for a level designer, you go for an environment artist or anything like that, you'll be really well versed in that, and you will learn a lot in that craft, but you might not learn as much as the other disciplines or other sides of the business. And one of the other advantages, obviously, I guess, of being part of the indie studio, you get to see more of going through certification side of it and dealing with like Sony and Microsoft and kind of their like certification process to have a grounding in that. And even like simple stuff like, is a designer in a game, you're like, oh, I want to put this trophy in or whatever, but there's actually rules behind the trophies that go into the game. There's a value you have to assign to it, and it's like that stuff doesn't necessarily come out if you don't get exposed to it. You just think, oh, we can put that in, it's just an award. But no, there's like strategies to how you, for most people, how hard it will be. Like I like working to get, like, for instance, 100% in a game or a platinum, but the stuff I hear in games to get a platinum or 100% achievement score is if it relies on multiplayer and getting to max rank. Yeah. Because I don't really ever have that much investment time in like a game to spend getting to level 50 and something, because there's too much content now. But if your game allows me to basically almost 100% it just by playing your game and playing through the content and enjoying it and taking in your world. Yes, if I have to explore it and go a little bit further, like outside the main path, that's fine. But as long as I'm not just like repeatedly having to do the same thing. So the grind can sometimes be too much to get to that level. And obviously when I had more time and I was younger and I was in college and uni and stuff, that was fine. I didn't care as much. Whereas now, as much as I like it, as much as I'd like to do it, it's like not having the time to dedicate even to one game, right? Like, so it's, as a designer, I want to stay up to date, right? Because I want to know what's working, how is someone doing this, like what is their interpretation of like a certain technique or a game mechanic or things like that. It's like, and also learning what's new in the industry. And then the flip side of that is, because so many games come out every week in our industry, whether it be AAA or indie, it's finding the time to play them. And what usually happens in my case is I'll end up playing this little gem or this little indie like game that blew up 2 years ago. I play it 2 years later just because I finally had the time. It's like, I still have that in my library. I can play it now, which is kind of like, it's the way it's kind of the way it goes. But yeah, trying to remain playing games, because I just don't have motivation to play games all the time. Like, I'll finish work. Obviously, you're working on them all day. You're kind of talking about them all day, and I just want to switch off, so I'll watch Netflix or I'll watch YouTube or something like that. But then the flip side of that is you never get round to playing that game, and then by the time you do, there's the next things out that you want to play or whatever, and it's
that's really interesting, because you've essentially, like, you're seeing how the sausage is made, right? It's that old analogy. So how do you like stay excited about like video games and stuff now that you know the whole process behind it? Do you still like really love like exploring and going home and playing video games, or is there times where you kind of dip in and out and you need like another form of medium to unwind? Or do you still love to, okay, I've spent a whole day trying to fix this line of code, it's completely buggered, I hate video games, I hate the profession, I hate the industry, but I want to go home and play a video game? Do you have moments like that at all?
Not where I hate the industry and I hate games, but I do have moments where I don't I guess I'm fried, or I'm just like I guess like mentally taxed from the day. So like I don't have the focus to jump in a game and play right now. But luckily, because we have stuff like that are more passive experiences, so I guess like kind of walking sims and narrative adventure stuff, like if you think years and years ago we had point and click games, like that kind of stuff like is ideal for when you're in that mindset, because you're just there to take in the game world, right, and take in the story. It's almost it's the equivalent of reading a book in some cases, and we have games that are like that now. They're like visual novels. But yeah, you kind of you're building this thing on a working level. The last thing you want to do is go and play a game. But yeah, I still love games. I still get hyped for them, despite I know how they're made and stuff like that. And I can see like watch trailers and stuff, and I go, "Oh, this is amazing!" If they pull it off. That's my caveat now. Is like, because like you kind of know and you dissect what's possibly going on behind the scenes. Just bearing in mind, unless I talk to the developer, it's all just theory, right? And it's all just assumptions. It's like obviously a little bit more educated than like your average gamer probably, because I've seen behind the curtain. But it is just that case of I will still get on the hype train. Like I'm a massive Final Fantasy VII fan, so when they obviously announced the remake, I've waited almost 10 years for this game to come out, but my hype never wavered for that. And when I played it, I was able to play it like switch my dev brain off basically, because like the game does have issues, like it's not perfect, but then again, no game is. But I love what they did. I love their reinterpretation of like the original story, which is something that's quite special for me. It's like it's one of the games I would peg that kind of got me into gaming, or at least got me obsessed with gaming. Obviously before that I played stuff on the Mega Drive and stuff, which is they were games that to me were very like mechanically driven. Like I wasn't super invested in the world or the story or anything, but it was super fun to run fast as Sonic, or it was super good to jump on stuff as Mario. But with Final Fantasy, like I love those characters, I love that world, like I love the kind of plight they were going with. And the battle system, turn-based battle systems, I still love to this day. I don't feel we get to see them as much in games anymore, and I understand why. Like it's definitely a very quiet test. And I think it's something which I props to, because what they did with the remix battle system is almost like that hybrid and best of both worlds, of where you can pause time, queue up your actions, release and go, or you can play it in real time. And that's just testament to bringing something, I guess, that was old, because they even kept the materia system that was old, but really nostalgic for me to see materia and stuff and still be in the game, play an impact and kind of the remake.
It's a super impressive remake just for that. Like, they're catering to the two audiences that loved the real-time action of 15, which was very like an action hack and slash almost, like very little way of like tactical based combat, but the purists that love the original turn-based stuff. And I'm a big fan of turn-based as well. I do enjoy it. I really enjoy like Persona 5's turn-based, but we're seeing a really new, interesting example of that with Final Fantasy VII Remake, but also Yakuza Like a Dragon is turn-based, but the way it plays out, it's very kinetic. There's a lot of, there's no like the combat isn't like fragmented or like it stops the combat whilst you queue up your attacks. It feels very much real time, but it is turn-based. And I wonder if more developers are going to be looking at these two games as examples. It's like, actually, my conceptions of what turn-based can be are totally different now because of what these two games are actually showing what is possible with turn-based. And Yakuza, I mean, it's great to see that finally coming to Xbox and other platforms as well. But so I'm really loving where turn-based is at the moment as well.
Yeah, Yakuza is one of the franchises that I feel like many of them now. It's just like it's too much of an investment to get involved. But I am curious by, like you said, I know just listening to other podcasts and things like that where they've talked about the more recent Yakuza games and like hearing them introduce turn-based stuff. It does make me wonder. It's like, would I get this? Would I be completely lost if I played this game like without playing the others? And it is, I guess it's the designer side of my brain. I'm just curious to see what they do different or how they use this system and stuff like that as well.
Well, Like a Dragon is good in that it's an entirely new character and it's an entirely new storyline. So it is a good jumping in point because the Yakuza line is not talking about the portable versions. It was 6 games long. All following one character, the Dragon of Dojima, Kiryu. So that is really daunting to say, oh my god, there's 6 games and now this is the 7th game. Like, how do I even begin to enter into this franchise? But it was kind of like a clean break narratively. So Like a Dragon is just this perfect entry point into the series. And of course it depends on whether or not people like turn-based. Of course, that could be a massive turn-off for a lot of people. But I'm enjoying it more than I was expecting. I was expecting a traditional turn-based, and it's not. It's something different, and I applaud the studio for that. Certainly do.
Yeah, I think traditional, like the idea of traditional turn-based stuff is kind of, I think like you said, it's kind of gone, right? You might get a classic mode or whatever in a game now that will give you that traditional feeling, but most recently, when I think back to really old school JRPGs, which obviously they showed meant to be every default 2, which I'm quite interested in. And then one that jumps to mind like more recently because it had the sprite art style was, I don't know if you tried Octopath Traveler, which was another kind of like Switch game, and I was like, yeah, this is just recapturing so much of what I enjoyed about those type of games, like kind of back then. So it's like there is still an audience there for them, and I'm really excited to see these developers still interested in doing that style of game.
Yeah, interesting that you bring up Octopath Traveler because that was Square Enix, I think, and they were really like trying to capture the classic Final Fantasy aesthetic, but make it more like 3-dimensional and like depth of field effects and stuff. And as soon as I saw the trailers for that, I was upset because I really wished that the Secret of Mana remake had taken this direction rather than this cutesy pop arty kind of 3D effect. Yeah. And I just thought, man, had they gone pixel art, but like modern pixel art, that would have been incredible. But anyway, we can gripe about that.
I think it's an interesting one, but I think it just comes down to who you had developing it, right? And also, I imagine the budgets for those games were very different on the scale of development side of things. Like Octopath was a new IP. It was like their chance, I guess, to try and breathe new life into a genre that wasn't super popular or super like high end at the time. There wasn't a lot of entries in like, I guess, I'd say like the AAA space, because I would still class it as almost like a AAA release. There wasn't that many entries in that style kind of coming out there.
Yeah. So we mentioned briefly of your time at Hangar 13 there. Can you go into the games that you got to work on there. I'm assuming the Mafia Definitive Edition was one of them. But were you at the studio when like Mafia 3 was getting developed, and like what other titles did you get to really delve into there?
So when I joined Hangar, they'd already started development on Mafia 1. So I joined in 2019. And my entire tenure with them was working on the definitive edition up until its release. And then anything else is kind of NDAs, like beyond that point. So there was other stuff going on, which allowed me to flex different muscles in terms of like the skill sets I'd been using up until that point, which was quite an interesting challenge kind of like for me. And like I did that for like a number of months following the release of Mafia. So like getting to kind of practice new skills, try different things. And then obviously decided at the start of this year that I would leave. And it's mainly a personal preference thing to try something different. And obviously like I kind of announced I left yesterday. So as of recording this for people who watch it on demand later. So I left at the end of January to kind of pursue a more contracting and freelance approach. And a lot of this was kind of driven by personal things I've wanted to try for a while, and the added flexibility, I guess, of being in freelance and contracting, giving you a little bit more control over your time, but also allowing me to, I guess, dip into multiple projects as well, because there's a couple of projects I want to try. I will have a mainline job, obviously, as well. Like, kind of, there will be that bigger, more invested time where I spend most of my time developing a game, which I will announce soon, probably within like the next week. But it's a nice setup and it's a nice foundation, and I'm excited to see what I can make of like this next opportunity or this next chapter, I guess, to kind of see what kind of goes on with that, and see if I can take advantage of some of that flexibility and kind of use it to my advantage as well.
We chatted briefly before going live about the flexibility that remote working has really given, like not just the gaming industry, but I guess all industries, and that flexibility of working remotely because of the pandemic, and it's opening up opportunities and as you said, talent acquisition, where normally you would have never gotten the opportunity to, because it would have been an in-office position, right? So, but you're now being able to apply for jobs and work for projects, studios, pretty much anywhere in the world. Time zones notwithstanding, of course, that's always going to be a bit of a challenge. But obviously, we talked about Moon Studios, who their entire setup has always been working remotely. So that's a really shining example of delivering an incredible product. Incredible art, incredible like Metroidvania level design, and all these different talents coming together, and they never work in an office environment. They've always been remote. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think the industry could learn from this kind of going forward. And do you think this is going to be more prevalent going forward when the pandemic does lighten and we do get back to some sort of normalcy? Do you think we're still going to see the talent acquisition from other parts of the world as remote positions?
I think it's more likely to happen. I still don't think you can ever replace the dynamic of having a team in an office together, like through all this virtual stuff and things like that. But I am a kind of like firm believer now of it doesn't have to be full time. You don't always have to be in the office like Monday to Friday, 5 days a week, 9 to 5 or whatever. Like you could literally be in for meetings, or there's like a specific deadline or feature you're trying to work on. It's easier to go in for maybe 2 to 3 days of that week, get all the conversations done, get all the meetings done, plan out what needs to be done for this feature. But then you could theoretically do the actual building of it from wherever. So I do think it's going to change people's perspective on a lot of stuff going forward. And like you brought up Moon Studios as a prime example. Yes, Ori is a phenomenal game. It's a beautiful game. And they've made 2 of them now and done it with largely a remote team. Obviously, I think the team being small helps. Obviously, the smaller the team, the less can get lost in communication and stuff like that as well. So I think you might see more remote indie teams pop up from this because like you can work with people from around the world much more easily. I think AAA will take a little bit longer, but I do know there are studios looking to offer the balance of both, or some of them are willing to offer you a fully remote role as well. But like for me personally, like I still always like to have the option to be first realizing I don't need to do that full time is what my biggest learning from like the last year of doing this has been.
Yeah, it's exciting to see where the industry is going and what opportunities are going to be popping up because of this. I mean, you know, this show kind of spawned from being remote and not being able to have that in-person contact, and that was just one like tiny, almost insignificant example of new technologies are having to be pushed out because of the remote demand for different stuff, and on a larger scale for actual development of products and applications, and different industries are having to cope. And definitely it's fascinating to see where we're going to be ending up. Totally. Yeah. So let's chat a little bit about the I guess the games that we're playing just now, and from not just a gamer mindset, but from the developer mindset, because January's typically a slow month, but we've had a couple of bangers that have been dropping already. So we're obviously going to be talking about Hitman 3, but you and I have also been playing an indie game which came out last year by Giant Squid Studios, and that's The Pathless, which is a beautiful little title as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on a couple of these titles.
So yeah, I think we exchanged a little bit about Hitman and The Pathless like over like kind of time. So with The Pathless, I really enjoyed it. It's kind of like one of those games where I'm like, this is a new step of what you can do with a smaller size team, right? Because it's an open world game, but it's not done by like 200 people. Yeah. Like for instance, it's kind of like it is a more medium sized developer doing this, but it also kind of rekindled I wouldn't say they're super complex, but for me, it was seeing how much they got out of, I guess, like a limited palette of mechanics. Yeah. And like, because then they just populated that world with all these puzzles. Because obviously, the bulk of it is you have to get the arrow to hit the target. Right? Yeah. Yeah. But you have to charge the arrow up, which involves you manipulating the environment and things like that. But it is just a bunch in like a mechanical way of looking at it. It's just a bunch of receivers that you're basically trying to put in, and all you're changing is the amount of them you have to go through before you hit the target, or the order you have to hit them in. So like the ordering thing is the like the music puzzles. So like the thing where it plays the tune, you have to replicate it. But it, like even doing that and going through it, I was like, I still found it super satisfying. One of my biggest, I guess the thing I like the most about the game, it's not hundreds of hours. Like I was able to 100% this game in I think like 10 to 11 hours, and I generally love doing it. Like the soundscape is amazing. The game just is beautiful to look at, and trying to get those perfect trick shots, you feel so badass when you actually pull off the perfects in every row. It's one of those games, it's one of those games where you feel it's almost meditative at times, because it's so beautiful. You've got that score by Austin Wintory, which is just spectacular, but you have this rhythm to like how fast you're dashing across the environment by nailing the targets, as you said, and it's this loop of just really satisfying movement and mechanics. I totally agree, but it's a beautiful game. Yeah, it's like off the back of that as well. Obviously, you've got the puzzles and stuff like that, which are really nice. Having you described it as the more meditative experience, you can stop and analyze your environment and kind of become immersed even more while you're thinking through and going through this process. And then you obviously get the flip side of that, where the boss fights, where you go into the other side of the realm. And the thing I liked about them, they all felt epic but different in their own ways. So like each one had a different variant. Obviously, you've got the chase sequence, which was the same at the beginning of the wall, but then every other phase was something different. So like you weren't just doing the same three things every boss fight or every plateau, because obviously that would have got old and boring quite quick. But it meant there was new strategies, there was new things. They mixed in platforming and then running, and then it was like do things in certain orders and things like that. And I was just like, these are just enough of a spectacle at the end of every plateau to make you want to keep going and see what the next one is, because they were changing all the time.
And the environment changes up as well. Like whenever you defeat the boss or the divine beast, I guess we could kind of call them, the environment changes. You can take it to a new environment. I've just hit the area where it's this kind of mountainous, snowy region, and now it's populated with these updrafts of wind. So it's completely changing how you traverse the land, and it's always kind of mixing it up just enough that it's never stale, it's never losing your interest. There's always something, just a little kernel of something extra to change up the way that you interact with the world. And for a small game, it doesn't feel small, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful. There's you can see the ambition there, but again, the core mechanics are really, really simple. I almost liken it a little bit to the Ubisoft game way back from 2002, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, where that was pretty simple mechanically, but everything around it was complex. So there was wall running, but it was the same button all the time, right? That your A button to start your wall running or to jump or to vault, and it was just one button to attack, and that was really it. That was your moveset. But the way in which the player,
Yeah, so I was going to say, with that, it's you're planning the actions, right? So it's like, I need to do ABC in order to complete this, but you need to time it right and stuff like that as well. So it's an effective way of looking at it.
But beautiful game. And of course, IO Interactive came out finally with the World of Assassination trilogy finale. Of course, Hitman 3. As a fully independent studio now as well, because they went independent after Square Enix kind of let them go with the IP, which is a great choice. But I've been just gushing like crazy over Hitman 3, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on your experience with the franchise, but also like on Hitman 3 specifically.
So I think like the World of Assassination, so like this reboot of Hitman, it kind of like it rekindled my love for the franchise in the first season. Just playing that Paris mission, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna lie, even as a developer, I was overwhelmed. It's like when you go into these spaces, there was so much. But throughout this franchise, they've refined this stuff. And then obviously, because Hitman 3 is like the freshest one in my mind, because I've been playing that a lot recently. It's stuff like having those mini narratives and those mini scenarios that you can completely but then there's even micro ones below that. And I was kind of like, I was talking about this on the podcast the other day, and it's all about becoming familiar with the level. Like these missions are designed to be replayed, right? You want to become the master assassin, you want to become efficient. And as like I said earlier, someone who doesn't necessarily replay games that much anymore. Like with each time I replay a level in Hitman, it's something different, and it's different enough to make me want to keep going back to see all the different eventualities. And there's so many of them, and you see the challenges and stuff like that as well, which encourage you to do this. But I like the kind of sandbox nature and the freedom we get with this within the new Hitman franchise, because the spaces themselves are so grand, they're huge, but they're not. It's not an open world game, right? But they're so densely populated, and it boggles my mind and breaks my mind a little bit to think of how much this has to be, from a development point of view, put together, and everyone's route and path and where they're going to be in the space. It's like, what triggers them to go and do this thing and how you queue it all up. But then when you get to think or plan your attack, I guess, sort of thing is the best way of looking at it. We string it along and see how fast we can do it. I mean, if you've seen the speed runs for this thing, like someone doing Dubai in like 5 seconds somehow.
God, it's
I'm interested. It's not very clean. Don't get me wrong of how they do it. It's like 2 headshots and just run out the elevator. But the fact it's possible to do is a very interesting way to look, because it means, especially Dubai in particular, when you start that mission, if you start from the if you stop, but like until you cleared that space over and over again and learned it, you would never notice, right? You would never think to, I don't know, because there's so much going on. That's like the Dubai mission. It's the one I've played the most, because I think I'm going to go through them all and try and do mastery. It's so grand. You're distracted, and kind of like your attention is drawn by so many different things, unless you're actively looking how to cheese it, I guess, and cheat the game. You're not going to look up. And like another thing as well, they give you such a breadth of opportunities to try these different things, which is just a testament to the team to account for all these eventualities and account for reacting to what the player does. using my gun is always like, it's a resort I never went to, I think, until like the final mission. And I just didn't really think about it at the time. I was like, usually I get into these spaces, I have my gun, but because I get in a disguise, that means I don't get frisked or whatever when I get around.
Yeah.
But I preferred playing more of a trapper play style, because I like to see the interaction I can do in the space and how I can set them up in different ways.
I'm very similar. It's a really interesting philosophy for game design, where you're an assassin, you're a hitman, but if you have to resort to a firearm, then you have this feeling of, okay, I've completely failed this mission because I've had to resort to shooting the target, when there's such a rich palette of other things that you can do to take out, where they will have absolutely no idea that an assassination even happened. You make it look like an accident, and that's the ultimate goal, right? And the sandboxes, as you said, they're so malleable with these dynamic little micro stories which are happening. And that's what I find most fascinating about it. It's like, I go into every mission, first off, spending probably like an hour just wandering around and listening to the little stories and these little opportunities that are popping up. And I just find it so incredible and mind-boggling from a planning stage. Like when you're, okay, guys, we're going to introduce a new map, and it's going to be this X location. And then like, how do you even begin to like map out like what can go on in this level, and then all the stuff that you can predict, like the player interactions as to how they're going to manipulate the environment and give the player so many opportunities and things that we want you to do. Like, this is how we want you to go through the level, but also we want you to make your own way through the level and your own way of doing different things. I just think, oh my God, the planning sessions must have been a lot of fun, but like crazy complicated as well.
Well, I think that's a testament to their whole development strategy throughout the franchise, right? Because each Hitman game doesn't have that many levels when you think about it. I think like there's 6 in this one, and I think in Hitman 2 it might have been the same. But each stage, like I said, is designed to be replayed, and it comes from that that dynamism that you were talking about, is how it changes to you based on what you do, and like disguises giving you access to new areas and things like that. And one of the best additions to Hitman 3 is this idea of shortcuts being hidden around each environment, so which if you unlock are open to you the next time you go through the space. So it gives you immediate access, or it might allow you to get into a building without changing your suit or something like that. Because like one of the interesting challenges I find, because I really like stealth games, is, okay, how do I do this in the suit? Anywhere. As soon as you're a restricted area, you'll be spotted, and that's kind of it. So that's a very interesting kind of like variant or kind of caveat to put on your play style as well. But yeah, speaking to, like you said, you spent an hour in a space. I think I spent about 2.5 hours in the Shankyu space, where you've got like 2 targets.
God,
and I was just like,
that's a China location, right? I think.
Yeah, it's huge though. Obviously, you've got 2 targets, but they're in 2 like separate locations and stuff like that. But just the intricacy and how big that space was, I was just like, this is. I just wanted to walk around. So I was just looking for all the disguises I could do to explore the space properly. But I imagine, that one will take. I'll probably use, because obviously I haven't been back and replayed that one yet.
I made such a hash of that one. I made such a mess of it. The first target was actually pretty easy. I disguised myself as a dumpling chef, and I found some poison. Poison is dumplings, and that was pretty easy. But then the second target, which for viewers, is this underground like medical facility, where they're doing like dodgy experiments and testing and stuff. And I had such a problem with that one, because it's like, it was so intricate, and there was like different security stages where you're going to get frisked at all times, and you had different levels of like different tier levels of security access. And I made such a mess of that one. It was a bloodbath, and I thought, oh my goodness, I have failed so badly at this. I need to go back and play it and do it properly.
One thing I know for sure on my second run through of that mission is I will do the lab target second. That's a pro tip for anyone kind of watching. Just because of how they stack up, and I know that now after I'm playing it, but I was just exploring the first time around. And I guess a bit more of a tip for you: just have a screwdriver with you, so then you can break all the vents. Don't need security cards, don't need anything. You can just break all the vents, and you can sneak around a lot easier. But I did really enjoy that mission, and I did, at least in the lab, I did the one where you get disguised as one of the techs, and I turned the machine on while she was in the room, which I think is one of the challenges or stories you get to do. Then I was like, but this is going to put my score down, because unless I can get out there before someone walks through, they're going to discover the body.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is not good, and I can't run out there because I've just killed them. So everyone's now paying attention to it. So you're already re-strategizing as you go through the first mission. So
yeah. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. So, oh man, we're coming to the end of the show, buddy. But I want to say a massive thank you for joining me on this. And of course, you have your own podcast, so please tell the viewers where they can find out all about your level design podcast.
It's called literally the Level Design Podcast, and I host that alongside a bunch of other designers from the industry as well. We've been doing it for a couple of years now, and you can get on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we have a YouTube, which is backdated episodes, so you can also pick it up on YouTube as well. And you can find us on Twitter at Level Design Podcast as well.
Fantastic. So viewers, thank you very much for tuning in on episode 26 of the Weekend Catch-Up Club. Again, a massive thank you for Jonathon for joining me on today's podcast, and we'll be back again next week with another special guest. So tune in for that and take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye, guys.